Tobi inspires me in a lot of ways. He's one of those immigrants who just seem to have it all put together, to be honest. So it was really good to get him on the podcast to talk about his life and how he approaches things, and we did exchange a lot of interesting stories. Like, I found that he dreamed of playing for Arsenal and he actually went for trials in London. I found that he came to Canada against his will. I also shared a story of mine that I rarely talk about outside. You should listen if you want to hear about that story. It's a story about my football career that almost picked up, but then went nosedive down. But if there's one thing that you take from this episode, is something Tobi said. He says, in life he believes that in life you get unlimited tries. And I think for an immigrant, like, that's a really good frame of mind to use or to have when you're approaching anything. Because like you're experiencing so much change. And sometimes it's not going to work out. Sometimes it's just going to fail. Sometimes a lot of things will happen. But you know what? You get up and you try again. Let's get to it. Welcome to this, Tobi. Like, I am super excited to do this with you because, like I was saying to you the pre-show, I think you're the perfect example of when someone switches off that survivor mentality from day one. Like, because like as immigrants, like sometimes you come from somewhere, you come to a new country, and like you said, you're at peace. And like, what else? Like, really, what else? But I want to kind of go back to like how, why, what led you saying to yourself, okay, you know what? I'm going to leave Nigeria and come here.
I mean, I came to Canada against my will, so, that, I never take credit for being in Canada. At the time when I finished from year 11, I said to my dad, listen, I want to be a professional footballer. I want to play for Arsenal. I even sat my mom down. I said, listen, I'm going to buy you a Rolls Royce. Don't worry. I'll play for Arsenal, left wing, but at the time, my dad was just thinking like, we need to make sure the kids are set up, right? So he actually paid for school fees in Canada before he even consulted me or anyone. He was just like, you're going to Canada. And I remember just crying. I was like, why are you sending me to somewhere where there's just snow and moose? Like, what am I supposed to do there? And it was so jarring at that point because we didn't know anybody in Canada, And so I came to Canada as I landed before my 16th birthday, went to, boarding school in Hamilton. And I quickly realized like, okay, I have to figure out, life on my own. But I was raised moving around, right? We moved from Nigeria to Belgium, Atlanta, Tennessee, back to Nigeria. So I was already kind of comfortable, going out. I think at that point, I'd already been to like 10 schools in my life, starting over, building friendships. I always lean towards the same things. I go play football because I'm good enough for people to, you get 22 friends, right off the bat. And then I always just lean on my humor. I like to make jokes, right? So that's usually how I assimilate. But that was how I got to Canada, and I didn't even want to go to university. So I told my dad, if I get all A's in this place that you sent me to, I don't want to go to university. I want to go back to England and try to make it as a football player. And he agreed. So I got all A's. The next day, we were in England. I tried out at Stamford Bridge. I tried out at the West Ham Stadium. Like, we got into an academy and then they were like, okay, where's your work permit? And at that point, it hadn't even clicked for me that footballers were workers. I thought they just received their 200K through PayPal or something, like it didn't even click for me. And that was pretty much where the dream died. It didn't click for me, and so that was pretty much where it ended. So I came back, played, soccer for my university. And that was when I realized like I wasn't going to be financially stable as a soccer player in North America because it wasn't developed enough.
Yeah.
Right. I was like, I'll make more money running businesses than I would. I mean, at that time, soccer players were making, 50 to 100,000. And there was a guy on our team that was the best player I think I've ever played with that didn't make it. Damn. And sometimes you just have to look in the mirror and be like, listen, if this guy didn't make it, I don't know how I'm supposed to do it. Not out of determination. I always say to my students, whoever I coach, I'm like, I'm not an idiot. I'm very self-aware in the sense that like I know where I can go and I know where I can't go. Right.
Mm,
But that was how that soccer dream died. And that's how entrepreneurship kicked in because I still had the life that I had dreamed in front of me. I still wanted to buy my mom a car. I still wanted to retire my parents. I still wanted to travel. I still wanted to, have, all these experiences. And I wasn't going to, there's more than one way to get to the life that you want.
yeah. I like the idea of one way to get to the life you want. Curious about something. Like when you now made that switch, and I hear you about being self-aware, but when you made that switch from actually there are two switches I want to ask about. The first one is the switch when it's like, okay, I need a work permit to make this work. And then you now say, you know what, that means I have to go to school. Like, how did you manage that emotionally, mentally? Did you came back to Canada, right, to school? Or you're like, what are you
Yeah,
going
I
to do
came
with
back
it?
to Canada. I mean, I cried. I remember crying on the train. I even had a girlfriend at the time in England. We were supposed to, and she was just like, "Listen, I'm not waiting for you." That was the end of that relationship too,
Oh, shit.
So, I mean, it was such a devastating way to end it. So I came back,
Yeah.
but I say to people like, when things go wrong for me, I always follow the same kind of processing pattern. I always cry it out because if you can't process it and you can't let it go, you become a hindrance to your future self. Because now you're pessimistic. Now you go, oh, this didn't work out, and I remember the pain from that. I never processed it, and I don't want to feel that pain again, so I'm not going to try again. But in life, you get unlimited tries. You can try as many
Yeah.
times as you want, right? But it's the courage to try again and again and again. So I cried it out, came back, found the next best thing, right? Which is always fine. Just find the next best thing. And I just played football and, did what I could. And I still enjoy it till today. But maybe I wasn't, supposed to be, maybe I was going to be one of the injured footballers like Hazard or, I don't know, but I feel like the life that I have now is fine. This is not just fine. This is the life that I dreamed of when I was like 20.
Mm-hmm. You know why I find this your story funny is because I have a similar one. Like I played soccer a lot as a kid. Like
Mhm.
I was really good. Like I was so good I was called Ronaldo. That's what they used to call me. My nickname was Ronaldo. That's how good I was. And still up to today, if I don't play that much anymore because there's no time. I have two kids. But when I play, people always ask me, why did you not play soccer professionally? This is when I decide to play. And I remember I traveled to Egypt actually I went to Egypt for trials, played there for like 3-4 months.
Oh, wow.
My agent was a horrible one. I sold my phone I had a ticket with me. I sold
Wow.
my phone for because my agent wanted me to sign a really silly contract. I called my mom. She's late now. God rest her soul. She's like, just come back home. I sold my phone I forget for how much. Used the money to move my ticket forward. I took just my bag. I went to the airport. When I got to the airport, I said I was going. God, like I still think of how stupid what I did. Some guy approaches me. I don't have any money on me. I don't know how I'm going to get home when I get to Nigeria. Some guy approaches me and says, hey, I have a big bag of ladies' sandals. I'm looking for someone to help me move it to Nigeria. Like, anytime I think about it, I'm like, what if there were drugs in that bag? Like, what were you thinking? He gives me $200 to do that for him. All I just need to
Wow.
do is because all I was carrying was a bag. So I had space. Like my ticket gave me 2 bags. All
Yeah.
I had to do was just take that bag. So all I did was I took the bag, check it in. God. I
Wow.
get to the Nigerian airport. The customs lady looks at me. Who has it? I'm like, it's someone outside. So what's inside? I don't know. It's just slippers. She cuts it open. You know what, Toby? I'm not even thinking about anything. I'm just like, madam, let me go. She cuts it open, pulls out like 2 or 3 slippers from it, and says, go. That's how I cross. I take the bag, give it to the guy at the I actually remember the guy coming to meet me at the entrance and saying, thank you so much. I say, well, this customs lady cut it open and took a couple of standouts from it because she was like, you know how Nigeria can be. And I just
Yeah.
walk out of the airport, use the money, change the money, the dollars, the $200 to naira. I think it was about 30,000 naira at that point in time or so. But that was enough for me to get a taxi to take it to my uncle's house in Lagos.
Wow. That is cutting it close.
Bro, like that, like, now that I'm much older, every time I think of that story, I always say to my wife that, I've had so many close shaves with stuff that I probably had changed the trajectory of my life completely. Like,
Yeah.
completely. Because if that was something was wrong in that bag, or if something was in that bag and somehow I just managed to scale through and anything that happened, like, what are you going to say to the NDLEA? I mean, dude, you're with the bag. Just go into jail, first of all, while we sort out, while you try to
What's
defend
happening?
yourself.
Yeah.
But now, so now back to Canada, schooling. I feel like I just looking at you and you telling me your story now and just seeing how you've navigated life so far, it feels like you've literally been an immigrant all your life. You've moved across countries, moved across schools and all that stuff. But I'm just curious, like now you had just gone through like something devastating. You're basically restarting life afresh. You moved back to Canada again. How was it settling in this time around? Because I feel like the first time when you settled in, you were like, okay, Dad, once I score all A's, I'm leaving this town. This time around is like, okay, I'm here. Like, so how did you, what was the mental thing? What was going through your mind at that point in time?
I think I was a simpler man back then. As long as I could play football and I had some friends, like it didn't really matter where I was, right? So I settled back in pretty well. I was like, okay, I guess I'm staying in Canada. I played football as often as I could, play for the school, played pickup. And I had a good time, So really, it wasn't until 2014 when I moved to France on exchange. I did an exchange program as part of my, international business degree. And I came here and I saw life here and how they are and what it's like and, being able to travel and the trains and all this stuff and the football. And that was when I was like, okay, I think we're going to move one more time after I finish school. So I actually left some things in France back then. And I went, I'll just go finish school and come back. But, Canada, you have to get your work permit, then you got to get your PR, then you got to get your citizenship. So a year after I got my citizenship, which was, 2023, it was when we moved back to France, me and my wife, to just come and enjoy the European lifestyle. We just get to travel and, enjoy being here. But that was
the wine and stuff.
Yeah. But I don't, you know what though, like, yes, I'm in it, but I'm a third culture kid in the sense that, I spent a lot of my life outside of Nigeria. So in a lot of ways, like, I feel like the world is my country, like we can go anywhere and I'll find a way to, to get things going. But as soon as I got back that second time, I knew like I'd be staying in Canada, and I'm so glad I did, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, man, you've built something really amazing for yourself, to be honest. France, Canada, like differences in culture, biggest cultural shocks for you. So I think more like, I know you're a world kid, you've moved around a lot, but so I think the cultural shock question is more like Nigeria to Canada, what are the things that kind of stood out to you? Like, okay, like what the hell is this? And then when you move now from Canada to France, like, what were the things that kind of stood out for you? Like, and I guess you say you prefer France. Everyone prefers France, to be honest. But so let me even ask that question.
I mean, the first time, like moving to Canada was just like, okay, it's cold. People are on their own here. They're not as communal as back home. And then it was just like, oh, I miss my mom's food. Like it was some of that stuff. And then Canada to France was very intentional. It was like, okay, again, Canada is cold, it's far and it's expensive, right? So I was like, okay, listen, I need to travel. I need to be able to go watch Arsenal. I need to be able to, see different parts of the world. We looked at London, we looked at Lisbon, we looked at Paris. And at the end of the day, it was, Paris is super central. I speak French. My wife speaks French. She's, her background is Congolese. And so I was like, okay, let's let's pick Paris, and the weather is better, it's more central, and that was it. But I'd already lived in France, right? So I already knew kind of what to expect. And the other thing is, I wasn't coming to live the average French life. Like, I work for myself. I don't need to interact with people in work. I don't need to deal with politics. I don't need to commute. So I get to actually just, wake up, no alarm, go to the gym, walk, and make the most of life. And that was really what I wanted, because Canada had become so stressful. And especially as I was leaving, my corporate job, it was peak stress, mortgage rates through the roof. I was closing on a house. My bank was like, you got to bring up, you got to come up with 120K or you don't get the house. So I'm hustling, to go into overdrive. I mean, by the time I left, I was just burnt. I had a perfect plan, and, two things essentially threw a wrench in it, and I felt like it was going to kill me. So France was very much like, even now, this entire year that I'm here, or two, it's just an escape. It's to calm down, to de-stress, to, I still have big plans, I would say, but mentally, I'm exhausted. Like, I can still build my businesses. We're still running the businesses. One of my friends was like, bro, why aren't you trying to like raise money and, go? And I was like, brother, like, I work 10, 15 hours. I travel every month. I spend as much time as I want with my wife. Like, this is all I need right now. I just need to be.
Yeah.
I said to my family as I was leaving, I was like, I just need to go be a kid again. Like, I just need to just go be a kid again. I had to grow up quickly. I got to Canada 15,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, your siblings are coming. That you have to pave a way. That you have to,
Mm-hmm.
make your parents proud, right? And so I did grow up, not as fast as most people, but still relatively fast. And now I feel like I have a window. Me and my wife don't have kids, so we get to just take care of each other, take care of ourselves, go to the gym, eat well, and that's been game changing for us.
Man, I hear you. I really hear you on two things. That Canada being so stressful the past few years have just been a really interesting time to live in Canada,
Yeah,
to be honest. Yeah, it's just been a very interesting time to see, and it just feels like it's not getting any better, or like it just feels like we're just kind of rolling around in the mud more and more every single day. And then the other part is that thing about, you're the first kid, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So the Nigerian first kid, I'm a firstborn too. Like, being a first kid in Nigeria is you literally being saying to yourself that you have to be an adult, like, way before. Like, so me, like, for example, I lost my two parents before within 5 years. And what that meant was that literally you had to kind of grow up, like, because like your parents are no more. So you're the
yeah,
first kid. And so you have to be the one who has to kind of step up and answer all the questions and do all that kind of stuff. Now, let's go to the thing we were talking about before the show, which is, you know, I, I'm always amazed when I look at your story and look at the things you've done and how you quickly switched off the immigrant mentality. And no, I'm not knocking anyone. It's just like everyone needs to survive. Is you come in, let's get a job, let's get a job, let's work, let's buy a house, let's get when they buy a house, you like, or you hear people say to you, once you buy a house, before your credit gets hit, go walk to the Mercedes Benz or Audi dealership, and you have to have good credit, put in credit, get like a luxury car, so that before they both show up on your credit score, like you have it, you're now paying it back. It just feels like immigrant life. And then you get stuck in that loop for like forever. And then the same person starts to say, oh, I'm paying bills all the time. I'm paying bills all the time. But you kind of build that for yourself. But it feels like you somehow switched that off almost immediately before you even kind of started off the journey. Like, you're like, I'm not going to be a survival first person. Like, I'm going to leave and I'm going to
yeah.
build stuff that matters. Like, I'm just wondering, like I'm wondering whether it's the function of how your journey has been so far, or like how do you process that?
I mean, both my parents are entrepreneurs, so I grew up watching rule breakers. Like, my dad retired from Exxon at like 44 or something. So part of me knew that, what I thank my parents for is like they always supported me no matter what business idea I had, which then built this confidence in me that I could do anything, right? So what you're talking about is not the immigrant mindset. It's just the what society has conditioned most people to do, right? Grow up, have a family, buy a house, buy a car, buy a second car, like it's not just us, it's just what you're. I mean, I did the same thing until one day I was like, why am I buying? I remember we bought our like 4-bedroom house. I was like, I'm not even having kids yet. Like, what am I
Yeah.
doing with, but someone was like, after you buy the first house, you roll the equity, you buy the second house. So I think a lot of people just buy into the plan, but it's the whole 9 to 5 till 65, live your best life after, you retire kind of thing. And there were just a few moments where I knew that like it wasn't going to work for me, right? Like the first is growing up, I went to 13 different schools growing up, like just starting over, new experiences, new adventures, sometimes every year. That's what I needed. It was how I was raised, right? The other thing is like after my first job, I got laid off, maybe a year in. And just like that, my income was gone. Like just like that, I was borrowing money for, dinner, borrowing money for fuel. And I was like, okay, this can't happen. I still remember that day and I still remember how I felt. I'm just like, I can't be so fully dependent on a company to the point where they can just ruin my life, you know? And then there were other things, even when I worked at Shopify, where it's like, oh, I want to go to someone's wedding and, oh, you don't have vacation days, or I get a 3% raise after a year of work when inflation was 8%. Like just things where I was like, okay, this isn't going to work for me. And it then became like, okay, how do I build a life that will sustain me living on my terms, going where I want to go, doing what I want to do? And it just became an obsession, like I was obsessed. I was saying to one of my students today, I was like, you don't hate your job enough. I'm like, if you hate your job enough, you'll find a way out, you know? But the thing is, mediocrity, the trap of mediocrity is that it actually is good enough. There was nothing wrong with my job. I had a good job in a good company. I lived a good life. I worked 9 to 5. I can't say I can't complain. I had it better than a lot of people. So that's the trap, right? But for me, deep down inside, I wanted more. And I knew I could get more because as soon as I saw one or two people do it, you talk about how the reason I still write on LinkedIn is simply because I know that I get to impact people. I can do everything I'm doing in silence. There's nothing that I do yeah, I can post on LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn program, but I can technically do everything that I do in silence. But I know what it means. I've seen people walk up to me in Walmart and give me a hug. I've been in different countries where someone's like, "Are you Toby?" "Oh, I did this because of you." I met a guy. I was like, I was driving Amazon and I started following you. I was doing Amazon delivery. I started following you and I started following your content. And I was like, no, I need to go do more. And he's like, no, I work as a software engineer at this company. And I never met this person. So you reach for the highest branch you can see. I understand my role in society. I understand my role in this generation without overstating it. Is I want people to see that it's possible.
Yeah.
How you do it is up
Yeah.
to you, right? But as soon as I saw that it was possible, it wasn't even, I met a black millionaire when I was maybe 20. I was like, okay, so that's possible. I met a guy who was doubling his salary every year, 30 to 60, 60 to 120, 120 to 240, every year. And I was like, okay, I guess that's possible, you know? And so the cool thing is as human beings, we reach for the highest branch we can see, right? And so as soon as you see that, oh, there's this Nigerian guy that has done X, Y, and Z, all of a sudden your barriers to why you can't do it fade because you go like,
Yeah.
well, what's so special? I mean, I say to my students all the I'm not that special. I'm not that smart. I don't let anyone give me the credit. I'm not Beyonce. Beyonce got, when God was handing out talents, he was
Yes.
giving, God gave, the parable. He gave Beyonce like 100.
You give it like 20 or 10.
I have one. I even just got one, on my way out. But everyone got at least one.
Yeah.
One thing that is your raw material to build the life that you want. Mine is I can communicate. My mom says I was like this as a kid when I was 2 or 3. I mean, I don't know anything and I don't remember it. So that means that it was the one thing I was given. So when people start to figure out their lives, I say you need to figure out 2 things before you start deciding what you're going to do. First, you got to go as far back as you can. I made my parents tell me their story from when they were born. What things made it through you to me? Then tell me my story from when I was young so that I know what raw gifts I was given. What was I like as a 3-year-old?
Yeah.
Right. And then I go forward and I wrote my own eulogy when I was 20 or 21. I wrote, okay, this is at the end of my life. This is what I want people to say about me when I die. This is what I want my wife to say, my spouse or my kids, my community, my friends, my family. This is what I want them to say. And I started to reverse engineer the life that I wanted. So when people look at it now and understand that, like, okay, I'm on my 13th business, it took, 10, 12 years to figure it out. It's very hard to call me lucky because I just stuck it out,
Yeah.
And so it's important to just remember, like, the best things in life aren't really reserved for those that try. They're reserved for those that try again.
Yeah. This thing you said, someone said to me the other day that the biggest gift you can give yourself is not talent, it's consistency. It's like you just show
Yes.
up every single day and just keep doing the thing. Like, it's so easy to give up, but really the
Yes.
people who you see at the end of the road are people who literally just showed up every single day. Like, they just came out like, okay, you know what? I'm going to try again.
Yes. You have to try again. You have to give it one more shot. You have to, like, just try. You just have to try. And you have to be able to go from thing to thing, failure to failure, knowing that you'll make it one day. But the only thing that will allow you to keep going is if you have something pulling you into the future.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like it's not necessarily about, like, I had a guy when I was pretty young. He was like, if you had enough reasons, you'd do the most incredible things. And it's like, if you have, I mean, I had enough reasons. I knew what I wanted to do for my parents. I knew what I wanted to, how I wanted to live, where I wanted to live, and who I wanted to help. I want to be able to pay people's school fees. There's people that reach out to me and I'm like, I want to help you. I don't have the money. So I knew I had to get rich, because it was more about what I told my mom would tell you this. Even as a kid, I wanted to give everything I had. If someone is on the street or someone that doesn't have food, I want to give to the point where I'm not eating. And I learned the hard way that self-sacrifice is not noble. Like, for you to, lose everything to get, now you're
Oh,
one of
it's
them.
not. Oh, it's not. It's not. You have to give. Like, I was the what did they
You
say?
have to give.
You can, if you're empty, if you're
Yes.
empty, you can't give out anything. So if you think that, I'm going to give out everything and they have nothing left, the world's going to take all that from you and then leave
Yes.
your dry husk by the wayside and move on. And then all your goals of doing that stuff for a long time is dead and gone because you took all you had at that point in time and you gave out everything without leaving anything for yourself. But yeah, that was a really good coaching session. Like, I feel like this is like, how I'm gonna tell people, like, hey, if you listen to this, like, it has a coaching session in between. I think like we're rounding up right now, but I think for me is two last questions. The first one is, so seeing, like, I feel like you're so interesting. Like, I call immigrants the in-betweeners, like, because we are like literally in between cultures. And I feel like you're in between so many cultures just because of the amount of times you had to start all over again, the amount of times you had to change schools, move across countries and stuff. Now you live in the US, you move to Canada, you move back to the UK. Now you live in Paris. But like, one is maybe it's like a two-pronged question. Like, what do you think is your heritage, and what do you find most beautiful about whatever you call your heritage right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm Nigerian through and through. Oluwa Tobi Oluwole,
Call it
you
in
know, like
fully, man.
they can is on the passport. Even if the passport is not green anymore, if it's blue, it's still Nigerian. My kids will be Nigerian, Congolese. You know, like it is what it is, right? Like I said to someone the other day, like if Nigeria was working, I'd be in Nigeria.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Like no, my parents didn't send me abroad because they wanted to be 7,000 miles away from their kid.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, no, this is our best chance at a better life, right? So I'm Nigerian through and through. And now I'm also Canadian, you know, and it comes with the benefits of being Canadian. I have this accent, but I also have my Nigerian accent. I also speak French, you know, so I'm, you know, a mix of all these different things. But at the end of the day, like my heritage is Yoruba, Nigerian, you know, like that's what's in the blood.
What do you find most beautiful about it? Like, and that's and more like out of if I ask you what you find most beautiful about it, it's probably like what are you going to pass on to your kids as you bring them into the world? Because your kids will probably be depending on where you give birth to them. If you decide to have kids, like they'll probably be Canadian or French, Congolese, Nigerian. So that I feel like they'll be, you know how it is where they won't be Nigerian first or they won't be Congolese first. They'll probably be wherever you
Yeah.
give birth to them first. But like, what's that one thing that you find beautiful that you make sure you pass on to them?
Just probably the values, you know, like I don't speak Yoruba so fluently. Maybe I'll leave them with my mom, but I think the values, like we learned a lot in Nigeria. We care about people. We take care of our people, right? Like we're also, you know, it becomes arrogance, but we're very, very unique people in the sense that if a Nigerian's in the room, you'll know a Nigerian's in the room, right? There's this self-confidence and belief that we have. And so I'm going to pass on the best parts of Nigeria and the best parts of my upbringing to the best of my ability, right? But there's also things that I don't like about Nigeria that I don't want to pass down. You know, like there's some things I'm like, no, you should be more Canadian in that sense. You know, our financial planning, you know, like how we, you know, plan for the future, how we, anticipate how we treat people that are not as well off as us. Right? In Canada, you're equal. Nigeria is the oppression Olympics. I'm better than you because, you know, and so it's just take the good and leave the bad. That's the philosophy, and we'll pass on the most beautiful parts: the music, the culture, the dressing, the language to the best of our ability, right? And yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we really excel at the operational Olympics thing. We really, it's so interesting how, like, I have this lady who I'm going to publish her interview soon. She was Indian but grew up in Nigeria, and she's like, she loves our people a ton. I'm like, yeah, like I can understand with that. I mean, there are also people who probably would agree with what you're saying. And then I think the last question for me is, with all you've done so far, like if someone was landing in a new country today, maybe for example Canada, like what are the few things you think that someone can do to set themselves up for success? Almost like a how to hit the ground running playbook, from your experience.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to find community as fast as you can. Church, mosque, football, painting, golf, basketball. Find whatever hobby you have. Find people to do it with. Gaming, FIFA. Because the guy that helped me, get into tech was a guy from my church. The guy that referred me to Shopify for the first time was a guy from my church. Like the guy that helped me prep for the interview the fifth time was a guy from my church. The girl I started my 3 skills with, the guy I started 3 skills with was my roommate from school. you got to find community as fast as you can because there's so much nuance in new countries. And nuance exists in conversation. It does not exist online. It does not exist it exists in conversation. Oh, I heard Bob's uncle is hiring, let me text. My first job in Canada was a referee. And it was because I played football. I had said to one of my Jewish friends, like, hey, I'm going to try to find a job this summer. He's like, oh, let me just get you in touch with Park, just tell Park that you played for this. But I mean, 2 weeks later, I had a job, and that was the first time I realized, like, and it's not community for the sake of advancement. It's community for the sake of community.
Yes.
And I like that's that distinction. Where the best opportunities lie in community for the sake of community, because now you don't feel like someone that's just trying to be opportunistic. You don't feel like someone who's just trying to use people, which Nigerians can do, right? It's like, come in, like, oh, if I can just use this guy to get into this. And it always backfires in the long run, right? Like, what you want is community for the people that you hang out with. I think that's one thing Canadians do so well. Is like, they'll go have dinner for no reason. Just, just hang out, talk about nothing. And in that, trust is built. In that relationship, and that is like, oh, you know what? I actually heard about this opportunity here, there, and the other place. I think you'd be good for it, right? When we're raising money for the company, it was a conversation, right? Like, there were no formal slide decks or anything like that. It was coffee and dinner, So there's a reason I say to a lot of people, there's a reason why Jesus just went around having dinner with people. Because that's the magic of building, right? As soon as you go in, Zacchaeus, have dinner. He's like, you know what? I don't even need this money. Let me give it away. And I think that's like the perfect verse on what you do in a new town. You just go have dinner with people.
That is so good. Thank you so much, Tobi. Like, thank you so much. Like, this has been beautiful for me, and I'm sure everyone's going to listen to it, to be honest. Like, you know how when someone says stuff and you're like, yes, like, this validates how you think about these things, and this how validates, or how I think about these things, brother. So thank you.
I appreciate it. I'm glad it was helpful.
Thank you so much for getting to this part of the episode. Thank you. I really appreciate that. If you know someone who finds this useful, please share this with them. If you know someone who we should talk to, who has a great immigrant story, please send them our way. We will reach out. And as usual, please, if you found this useful, please like, share, subscribe. I would appreciate that. Have a beautiful day.